The stars above the frontier colony of Esperin burned like cold, distant eyes, watching a tragedy unfold in silence. On the outskirts of the settlement, where metallic homes clung to the rocky soil and the air tasted faintly of iron, a man named Ryland Voss carried the weight of a universe that had already tried to break him once. He was a former Navy SEAL, hardened by years of covert warfare and battles fought in the dark corners of forgotten worlds. Yet nothing in his storied past could prepare him for what he was about to face. His son Elias was the reason he had chosen exile on this quiet colony, far from the noise of war, far from the bloodshed, far from the ghosts that whispered in his dreams. Ryland had hoped to build a life defined not by violence, but by the gentle warmth of fatherhood. Elias had been the last spark of innocence Ryland believed he could still protect, but peace rarely survived contact with power. On the night the Galactic soldiers arrived, the ground trembled beneath the rhythmic march of armored boots, their silver plating reflecting the pale moonlight. The regiment belonged to the Dominion, a ruthless regime known for enforcing its will through fear and calculated brutality. They claimed to be searching for insurgents, yet everyone in the colony knew their accusations were simply pretexts for domination. When the first blast echoed through the settlement, Ryland had been working on repairing a broken generator, unaware that the quiet world he had built was unraveling. Elias, curious and brave like most children his age, had stepped outside to see what the noise was. That single moment sealed his fate. By the time Ryland reached the open doorway, smoke was already creeping between the houses, and the cries of terrified colonists filled the air. He saw the flash of blue plasma and heard a sound he would remember for the rest of his life. A short, sharp gasp in the throat of a child who had barely begun to live. Elias collapsed on the dusty road, his small form illuminated by the cruel glow of Dominion rifles. The soldiers didn't even pause to look at what they had done. To them, a child was collateral, not a life. Ryland fell to his knees beside his son, lifting him as if he could somehow shield him from what had already happened. Elias's eyes flickered with confusion, pain, and the faintest trace of fear, but his small hand found Ryland's, gripping tightly as if begging him not to let go. Ryland whispered promises, desperate, trembling promises, that he would fix everything, that he would save him, that he would keep him safe. But the warmth faded quickly, and with it, the last light in Ryland's universe dimmed. Something inside him cracked, not loudly, not violently, but with a cold, quiet finality. A man can endure many wounds, but there are few that cut deeper than losing the person who embodies every reason he has left to remain human. The Dominion soldiers moved on, leaving destruction behind them. Fires flickered across homes, casting long shadows that danced like specters. Ryland sat in the road long after the marching faded, holding Elias's lifeless body, while the world around him dissolved into chaos. Grief hollowed him, but beneath it simmered something darker, an awakening of the warrior the universe had once feared. When dawn arrived, the colony was nothing more than smoldering ruins. Survivors whispered about fleeing, hiding, or surrendering, but Ryland did not speak. He wrapped Elias in a cloth and carried him to the hill overlooking the settlement, the place where they used to sit and watch the twin suns rise. The silence was profound, broken only by the soft hum of the wind brushing over the barren soil. Ryland laid his son to rest with trembling hands, pressing his forehead against the dusty ground as rage and sorrow braided themselves into a vow. The Dominion had taken the one thing he could never replace. There would be consequences. As Ryland descended the hill, something shifted in his posture. His steps became purposeful, his gaze sharpened, and his breath steady like a man preparing for war. He didn't know how he would fight an empire, but he knew he would, because he had nothing left to lose. He returned to his home, retrieving the sealed crate he had buried years ago beneath the floorboards. Inside lay the tools of the soldier he had once been. Weapons crafted for silent operations, armor designed for impossible missions, and a data chip containing old coordinates of allies he never thought he would seek again. Among them were two beings considered myth by most, a pair of massive, elusive warriors from the uncharted frost forests of Terravax. The Bigfoots, as humans had come to call them, owed Ryland a debt older than the Dominion itself. He did not know if they would answer. He only knew he would find them, and when he did, the galaxy would finally learn what it meant to steal the heart of man built for war. The journey to Terravax began under a sky veiled in ash. with Rylan moving to the wreckage of his former life like a ghost seeking purpose. He left Vesperin without ceremony, guided only by memory and a compass embedded deep in his instinct for survival. The transport he commandeered from an abandoned outpost was old, scarred by years of neglect, and prone to shuddering like it resented being awakened from its slumber. But it carried him away from the ruins of the colony and toward the one place in the galaxy where hope and danger coexisted in equal measure. Terravax was not a world anyone visited willingly. Its reputation alone deterred even the most seasoned explorers. But Rylan was not visiting for adventure. He was seeking allies forged by hardship, loyalty, and a bond hammered in the fires of a forgotten mission. As the ship pierced the thick, frost-laden atmosphere, Terravax revealed itself as a world of towering obsidian mountains, ancient forests coated in perennial snow, and winds that wailed like the lamentations of lost warriors. The landscape stretched endlessly, fierce and unwelcoming, as though the planet itself challenged any who dared trespass. Rylan recognized its harsh beauty from a lifetime ago, remembering the mission that had nearly killed him and the unexpected friendship he had found amid the chaos. He landed the transport near the edge of the frost-wild expanse, a region said to be home to legends that outsiders dismissed as myth. But Rylan knew better. He had fought beside those legends. He had watched them fall and rise again with the resilience of beings carved from the planet's very stone and ice. As he stepped onto frozen earth, the wind tore at his coat, and the cold bit sharply into his skin, reminding him that Terravax respected strength but punished the unprepared. Rylan moved with deliberate care, navigating through the dense cluster pines that towered overhead like silent guardians. His footprints sank into the deep snow, leaving a trail behind him that seemed to stretch into eternity. Yet he pressed onward, driven by a sense of purpose that bordered on obsession. Hours passed before he reached the ancient path, the trail that wound through the frost wild and into the heart of the territory claimed by the Bigfoot clans. The trees grew thicker here, their trunks colossal, their branches draped with icicles that chimed faintly in the wind. Every step Rylan took was measured, respectful, for he knew he was being watched long before he saw any sign of the great beings he sought. A distant rumble echoed across the forest, so low and deep it vibrated through his bones. Rylan tightened his grip on the satchel slung across his back, knowing the sound was not thunder but movement, massive movement. He slowed his pace, lowering his hands to show he came unarmed and without aggression. The forest went silent, the air thick with anticipation. Then, from behind a veil of falling snow, a shape materialized. A figure nearly 3 meters tall, cloaked in fur as dense as winter itself, stepped into view. Its eyes glimmered with intelligence, amber and unblinking. Rylan's breath hitched slightly, not out of fear but reverence. He recognized this being Korik, the elder warrior who had once shielded him during a battle that should claim both their lives. Korik regarded him with the solemn awareness of a creature who understood grief without needing words. Rylan bowed his head, a gesture of respect he had learned long ago. The massive creature stepped closer, its footsteps muffled by the snow. When Korik's voice broke the silence, it was deep and resonant, like boulders grinding beneath ancient earth. "You return burdened," he growled softly. Rylan met his gaze, the weight of his loss evident in every line of his face. "They killed my son." Korik's eyes narrowed, the amber glow flickering with something primal and fierce. Another figure emerged behind him, a second warrior, slightly smaller but every bit as imposing. This was Thalen, the younger of the two, known for his impulsive nature and unwavering loyalty to his clan. He examined Rylan with curiosity and recognition, his breath steaming in the cold air. Rylan reached into his satchel and retrieved a small token, a medallion engraved with the symbol of the pact they had forged years ago. He held out to Korik. "I'm calling in the debt," he said, voice steady despite the storm inside him. "I need your help." Korik took the medallion gently between his massive fingers, turning it as if rediscovering a relic of another lifetime. After a long moment, he nodded. "A debt of survival," he said. "Honored with survival." Thalen stepped forward, expression sharpening with determination. "Who must fall?" he asked. Rylan exhaled, allowing the first sliver of resolve to solidify inside him. The Dominion. The wind howled around them, swirling snow into spirals that danced like omens. Korik and Thalen exchanged a silent look, a conversation forged through decades of trust. Then Korik placed a heavy hand on Ryland's shoulder, an affirmation that transcended language. "We stand with you," he said. For the first time since Elias's death, Ryland felt the faintest spark of strength returning. He was no longer walking into war alone, and the Dominion, so certain of its power, had no idea what was coming. The march toward vengeance began at dawn, with Ryland, joined by Ryland Voss, moving to the snowy expanse beside Korik and Thalen, their silhouettes carving a path to the frost-like omens carried by the wind. The planet Terravax watched in silence as they pressed forward toward the stronghold of the Dominion, each step fueled by a purpose that bound them tighter than blood. Ryland felt the familiar tension of an imminent operation settling into his muscles, sharpening his senses with the precision of a man who had reclaimed his identity not by choice, but by loss. Though he had traveled with the Bigfoot warriors before, this time the mission carried a weight neither they nor he could ignore, for the cost of failure would be measured in more than lives. It would be measured in the memory of a child whose absence carved grief into every breath Ryland took. As they approached the ridge overlooking the Dominion outpost, the metallic structure gleamed under the rising twin suns. Strong, fortified, and humming with the quiet menace of advanced weaponry, it resembled a predatory creature lying in wait. Ryland crouched low, studying the patrol routes, the turret placements, and the subtle patterns that revealed the outpost's vulnerabilities. Korik and Thalen lowered themselves beside him, their breath steady and controlled despite the bitter cold seeping into the air. Ryland felt a strange comfort in their presence, not merely because of their immense strength, but because their loyalty was woven from honor, not obligation. "The entrance is heavily shielded," Ryland murmured, eyes narrowing. "But the generator node on the southeast side, if we disable it, the field drops." Korik nodded once. "We break the spine," he rumbled. "Then the body falls." Thalen's fist tightened with anticipation, but Ryland placed a hand on his arm, grounding him. "Patience," he said quietly. "We strike once, strike hard, and don't give them a chance to recover." They moved with silent coordination, descending the ridge and weaving to the jagged rocks until the hum of the generator vibrated through the air. The node towered above them, its surface glowing with pulses of blue energy. Ryland signaled for Thalen to prepare an impact strike while he accessed the terminal panel, tools flashing between his gloved fingers. As the lock disengaged, a warning alarm flickered to life, but before it could fully sound, Thalen drove his fist into the core with a force that shook the ground. The energy field sputtered, warped, then collapsed entirely. Spotlights flared across the compound. Dominion soldiers rushed from their posts, weapons raised, voices shouting fractured commands. Ryland drew his rifle, taking cover behind a metal crate as blaster fire scorched the air around him. Korik surged forward like an avalanche unleashed, his roar splitting the sky as he swept a soldier off his feet with a single blow. Thalen leaped into the fray beside him, moving with ferocity that left soldiers stumbling in terror. Ryland timed his shots with precision, each one eliminating a threat before it had the chance to harm his allies. The battle intensified, the air thick with smoke and the metallic sting of plasma discharge. Ryland advanced toward the command chamber, driven by a cold, focused fury that burned through every obstacle in his path. A Dominion officer stepped forward, armor gleaming, weapon drawn. "Stand down," he barked. "You're outnumbered." Ryland fired before the man finished speaking, the officer collapsing without ceremony. "Wrong," Ryland muttered. "You are." Inside the chamber, consoles flickered with data, and the walls vibrated with the hum of encrypted transmissions. At the center stood a hologram of the Dominion insignia, the same emblem that had marked the soldiers responsible for Elias's death. The sight twisted something deep inside Ryland, sharpening the grief he carried into a blade of resolve. He accessed the terminal, initiating a data extraction sequence that would provide the coordinates of the Dominion division responsible for the Vesperan massacre. As the download completed, Korik and Thalen entered, their fur matted with battle but their eyes burning with triumph. "The outpost is ours," Korik said. Ryland nodded, the data chip warm in his hand. "This is the first step," he said quietly. "The ones who did this, they're still out there, and I'm not done." Thalen approached him, gaze fierce. "Then we hunt," he said. "Together." Ryland looked at the warriors who had become more than allies, who had become the strength he needed when his own had faltered. The pain of Elias's loss still throbbed within him, but now it was tempered by purpose, sharpened by justice, and fueled by a promise he intended to keep. The Dominion had awakened something they could never control, and as the sun rose over shattered outposts, casting long shadows across the snow, Ryland stepped forward with a renewed sense of direction. The road ahead would be brutal, filled with battles and truths that would test every part of him, but he no longer walked it alone. The fight for his son had only just begun.